Anyone like to ask? John.
Jarvis, you said that you were self-taught. You know an awful lot of chemistry and alchemy and the mysteries of ancient. I am new to that. How did you arrive at all that information?
Well, it started early on at Paul Kuhn's. We were actually making frames. We were painting wooden frames. We used to call one a Pratt frame. We'd put it around every Ron Moppet. We'd make it from raw wood and paint it. And so there was this tradition at Paul's when I started there of making things from scratch, right? Which was like, for me, it just seemed pretty great. I had a client of Paul's who had a place in London and a place in New York and here. And they came here and they had a piece they wanted framed, but they wanted it framed with a frame that they can see in London or New York, but not here. It was a simple 3/4 face, water gilded, contemporary frame. And I, stupidly, think to myself, well, how hard can that be? So I literally just started down the path of what's gilding, what's water gilding, how do I make this thing, what's gesso, what's clay. And at the time, the internet wasn't up and firing at full steam. So it was trips to the library, doing as much reading as I could, and fortunately came across Santini's recipe in a book talking about furniture restoration. Now, I kind of had rudimentary ideas of how to make the gesso, but it wasn't refined and it failed an awful lot. When you start gilding, I have recipes for spring, winter, summer. Calgary's pretty good because we're pretty constant. But I can put in the winter with forced air in Calgary, I can put gesso on and I can put clay on the next morning after I've smoothed it. If the people I know working in New York City, they laugh. They'll gesso a frame. They can't smooth it for another 5 days. It takes that long for the moisture to come out. So there was all these things that I had to figure out to make it work, and I failed an awful lot. I just, for some reason, was enamored with the idea of, wow, you can take this thing that's so thin, nothing to it, gold is so thin, breaks apart. You can't pick it up with your hands. And you could attach it to this substrate. So lucky for me, I ended up at Paul Kuhn's shop. Lucky for me, that client walked through the door with curiosity. Lucky for me, I guess, didn't know what else I could do. Like I could act, but like it really doesn't pay the bills, right? And so you end up going, well, what is this thing? And I just totally got a kick out of being able to figure it out, you know? And then that starts the whole, oh, I can do this. Oh, so then you add more elaborate shapes, you add carving into it, you do all of these things, and you get further along. Lucky for me, when I went out on my own and left Paul's, Paul was really generous with his time and effort. Paul was so good to me. Like, I think I would have fired me. Because Paul's was like a place where you had to get work done to generate money, but it was also, he was an artist, Kevin was an artist, everybody was artists. So they let me like play on work time to figure this sort of thing out. So I really have to give him a lot of credit. And finally, when I went out on my own, I was able to take some time off and go mostly to the US and work with gilders there who like watched me work and they're like, who taught you? Because they saw me handling the materials. There's a way you pick gold out of a book. There's a way you back your book with a piece of mat board so you can flip it and get the next leaf out. There's a way you cut it with the knife. There's a way, once you cut it, the knife swings down, your tip's in between these two fingers, it goes to these two fingers, you pick up your leaf, and you go there. All the while, you've got water on it at the right time, and it all happens. It's like this staccato dance that happens along a length of molding, right? Well, those who've been trained by masters get their knuckles wrapped all the time. Don't do it that way. You're slow. You're slow. You'll never be quick enough. So they force them into this routine and this maneuvering that makes them quick. And I never had that. So I was able to gild to their opinion fairly well, but they were gobsmacked with the way I did it because nobody had ever shown me. There's nobody in every art school. Like if I was in art school in the 60s, maybe not here, but if I was in New York, I most definitely would have had a course in gilding. The European gilders came to America and they taught. Craft was still taught in art schools, right? It was a thing. That's not happening here. So I never had the opportunity. But long answer to a short question, because I'm dumb enough to try and figure it out. And then they call it getting, like, don't catch the gold. Like, don't fall in love with gold. Gold, like the same people that would go to the Yukon and fight to find it, it's almost the same thing by working with it. You get gold fever in a funny sort of way.
Another question?
No, it's dinner time.
Yes.
I will. I always have. So, do you ever find yourself with the thing, the painting, the client, and yourself, that there's things that have to be handled more diplomatically? Let's say, like, do you ever say, like, in your mind, no, you're wrong, you want, or do you generally find that you're trusted? Like, so what do you do in a dilemma like that?
It's called the consult, and it's when the client brings in the thing and they put it on the table, and everybody looks at it, and then there's this discussion that can happen. And there were frame shops where I learned, say at Prince Charming, where Janine worked, where we started all that long time ago. They were places where the client would come in and tell you what they wanted. And they would, on occasion, bring the pillows in from the couch in the room that the thing was going above. Like they would bring the accoutrement of the room so that you would make a decision for the frame that was more related to the interior design of the space than to the piece of art, right? And I think probably for me is that the minute I was confident enough in what I was doing, and I'm sorry to say this, and I know it's taped, I don't entertain it anymore. I really don't. What I try and do is the piece of art lands on the table. If I don't know who you are, we'll introduce each other. I'll ask you a few simple questions. Where is the thing from? How did you come to have it? Do you have any preconceived ideas as to what you want to do? But the whole time that's happening, I'm looking at that thing, and I've been doing it for almost 26, 27 years now. So there's not a lot of things that stump me on first view, but I do try and look at it, and while we're talking, and it appears as though I'm giving you a choice, I'm actually thinking about what I've done in the past and what frame on the wall is going to best suit this thing. And I'll usually go to it, and I'll say, I'm not sure what you were thinking, but let's take a look and see what this does. And I'll put it on the table. And the consultation will go very well if by the end of it, and it may go for 10 minutes or it may go for an hour, it's always a successful one for me is if we go back to the first one. And quite often we do. And that's not by chance. And the person with me usually says, oh my God, how'd you do that? It usually takes forever to figure this stuff out. Because that's been the experience. But I do it every day in, day out. I'm in a frame shop looking at art. We frame it. We make all of these decisions about things. So it shouldn't be a surprise that I can, in about 5 minutes, come up with a pretty good solution to frame that piece of art. Because that's what we do. You don't. Ever. You don't have frame samples in your basement. You don't have a mat caddy. You don't play around with like good. You don't cut it. You don't join it. You don't.
I actually have a story to tell on that. So Carolyn and I purchased a not very big Tanabe, and we popped in, and Kyle and Shannon were there, but not Jarvis. So they said, well, we could wait for Jarvis to come back, but we said, well, let's see. So Kyle and Shannon and Carolyn and I decided how it would be framed. So then the question is, what would Jarvis say? So we all agreed 100% that Jarvis would love it. So a while later, Shannon calls and says, your Tanabe is ready. We go down, I grab it, I don't look at it, I bring it home, and we hang it up, and Carolyn says, that's not what we chose. And so I call up, and Shannon sheepishly says, no, Jarvis thought this would be better. And he was right.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny place in the art world. It's like the frame is always needs to be subservient to the art. You can go crazy if you're framing a mirror, like fill your boot, like do whatever you want. But if your frame is going around a painting, it needs to always it's a slave to the artwork. It's never you can't be more than that thing inside. And occasionally, yeah, framers are really opinionated about how, they think what they think would be best. But if you're working with a good one, and there's lots of them around that work with art every day, you'll know it because you'll get things that make sense, that let you look at the art. All of those things.
Well, thank you, Jarvis. I would say, speaking from my own experience, that you've always been successful in the sense that I've always thought it was our idea that would be the perfect frame. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jarvis.